Welcome back to a Boxscore Geeks show. I am Andres Alvarez, coming off the bench for Patrick Minton. Back as always is Arturo Galletti, and we have a playoff-studded show for you today. Of course, another story happened to hit. We're not actually talking D'Antoni. We're going to have to push that off to next week. Although I'm going to have to give either props or I don't know what to give. I'm reading the Showtime Lakers about the 1980s Lakers and just got through Paul Westhead's firing. And Magic Johnson, of all people, talked about Mike D'Antoni's firing in a not too pleasant way. So it brought up memories of Paul Westhead.
Well, I think Magic might regret like going after Mike when Mike is coaching OKC or the Rockets next year, and beating the crap out of the Lakers.
Why is Magic Johnson going to care a lick about how the Lakers are doing when he's with the Clippers?
Well, we don't. That's a rumor. I'm more.
All right. So actually,
I am prepared for my Oprah overlord.
That would be cool too. Okay, so just so you know, we're going to talk the playoffs so much. I don't know, Arturo. Just before we even get to there, has there? In fact, I know the answer is there hasn't. But just what are your thoughts on the first round of this playoffs? Normally, there is not this much news. There are not this many potential upsets. The record for upsets, and I use upsets loosely because that includes the 4-5 seed in the playoffs, in the first round is 3. This year is just absurdity.
Yeah, and I was talking to somebody about this, which is I was basically saying, look, and I was talking to a coworker, I was talking to somebody on Twitter about this, which is, look, there's a couple of series here, and I tweet overtime games like ties. So we have one series that's had 4 straight overtime games, which is the OKC Memphis series, which to me means those teams are basically identical in terms of records. I think we have another series which has also had the multiple overtime games, which is the Houston-Portland series, which again I think Houston is slightly better, but Houston does dumb stuff that actually brings them down to the level of Portland, and we have a lot of injury weirdness and schedule weirdness going on. So Indiana wasn't as good as their record. Atlanta was better than the record because they were injured half the year. We know that Memphis was better than the record. We know that Golden State probably is slightly better if they can get ahead. But
to your point, Golden State is a playoff team where they're very scary, where their problem was their bench. They weren't built for the regular season.
The problem with the reason I didn't believe in the Warriors is the same reason I didn't believe in the Warriors at the beginning of the season, which is injuries. And turns out like Andrew Bogut is out. If Andrew Bogut was here, I mean, I'd be saying buy Warriors, buy, because with Bogut, that team is damn scary. Without him, I mean, I think they've been helped by the fact that the Clippers really haven't been all there. I mean, I still think the Clippers are making the conference finals, and because I think of all the teams, to me, they're the one that looks the best, probably. I think the biggest problem the Clippers have is depth, and they, the thing that will kill the Clippers if like Blake got hurt, because they have no bigs. If you're rolling with Big Baby, it's bad.
So anyway, by the way, we've completely gone off the rails already. We should try and keep it a little structured, but there's just so much news in the playoffs that it'll be hard to stay on the rails, but we'll do our best. But the story that actually managed to grab everybody this last week is Donald Sterling. And I wrote a piece about this, and basically my feelings are mixed. And I'd love to hear you chime in on this, Arturo, because we've talked a few times about just underlying racism of the NBA. And my problem
let me say without dropping things, like the story is so big that today I got a retraining at work on what's actually what you can and cannot do in social media, and like Donald Sterling was brought up. Right, so it was very specifically said, like, if you're like him and you say dumb stuff, right, you can get into real trouble. And so
okay, so here's my point on that.
Here's like super non-sports.
Yeah, it is. But here's the annoying thing: for Donald Sterling, I feel annoyed here because I was mad at a comment by Mark Cuban where he basically said, "This is a slippery slope for the NBA to take," and in a way, I agree with him. But I'm going to quickly jump off of that. Basically, it is illegal in California to record private conversations. The NBA is making a decision based off of a recording that was obtained illicitly. And there's something problematic about it, because the lesson here, when you got retraining at work, is basically don't say anything that may be illegally recorded and given away, which is not a good message. The thing about
Well,
Donald Sterling is that he has been in public lawsuits where he has said similar stuff to this. So it's like if
yeah,
the NBA wanted to crack down on him for being a racist and a bigot, they have public records that they can go back to. Using this tape is actually problematic, in my
well,
opinion.
and as I said, I mean, if it was a situation where the only evidence was the an illegally obtained tape, then yeah, it would be different. I think here, like, we have a problem. And I was listening to, there's a great, I think, Bomani Jones was talking to.
Oh, that, by the way, I know we didn't prepare this too much, Brian, so I don't know if you can get this up, but we'll include the link, in the post itself.
It's on Deadspin, so it should be hard to get.
This Bonnie
What
Jones
Bonnie
interview,
Jones is based,
amazing.
and he's talking to Dan Lebertard, and they're both kind of saying, look, we've known this guy is a racist d-bag, and we've known this for ages, and I think the preponderance of evidence is out there. They just hadn't had a flashpoint situation to drive it home. And I think the league was basically hoping that Donald Sterling would go away quietly. And he's 83 years old, so I think they were hoping that he was going to die, and his family was actually going to sell the team because that's what they're assuming was going to happen. So basically, and I think everybody was happy to let it lie because he's basically disconnected himself from, and I've said basically 50 times, but he disconnected himself from the day-to-day operation of the team. So, he's not running the Clippers into the ground anymore. They're turning it around. They've got a good organization. He's actually got a pretty decent track record for hiring minorities for that team. And they were kind of hoping they're playing a waiting game. They said, look, it was just easier for us to wait for him to die than to take any action. But once he does this, and the players basically said, and the players, there's stories out there that the players were looking to walk. They were literally not going to play a game and walk from the game and embarrass the league if the league didn't make the right call. And I think Silver acted in the right way. I think he was very direct. But
so here's where I'm going to jump in and disagree because as Sean, who is one of the most common commenters at the Wages of Wins and Boxscore Geeks, been around forever. I am okay if the NBA realizes they have to take action. But the actual thing they need to do here, and this is the rough thing, and here's what they didn't do, is say, look, this guy is a problem, and he is our problem, and we have made a mistake for letting him go for years. And we have to own up to that and admit that we have known and didn't do anything. And that's the point. They didn't need to use the tape. They didn't need to use the illicit tape. They could have used years of evidence to say, we were wrong and this is unacceptable behavior for an owner. And other owners, you're on no.
Here's a couple things wrong with that. I think the first one is this isn't really Silver's problem as much as you argue. This is more like David Stern. David Stern was not a guy. He's a lawyer.
No, you cannot. No, I'm not going to let you finish on that. You cannot claim that Silver's hands are clean. He has been with the NBA from '92. He is deputy commissioner. His hands are not clean.
Let me walk through my point. So if Silver did not want to pursue the litigation, and he did not have the cause. And here's the important thing if Stern didn't want to do that. And the difference here is the only reason Silver is able to come out and say this is because he has such a swell public opinion that he can guarantee that all other 29 owners are going to give him the power to execute. And see, this is what people forget. The commissioner is a paid employee of the owners, right? So unless the owners are willing to give him the votes and the empowerment to actually take care of the situation, the only thing he can do is embarrass himself. And if you look at the story, like when Donald Sterling moved the team from San Diego to LA without the approval of the league tried to fine him, I forget how many dollars it was, and
$25 million.
And Sterling countersued, and they had to settle. They said, "Fine, we'll just pay you."
They didn't have to settle, but that is a case of your. And so to your point, Arturo.
The history of Wildcat owners, not just for Sterling, but you look at Al Davis in the NFL, is like, if I'm the owner of the franchise, the only way you can get me out of that is in a situation where all the other owners are willing to say we're going to throw you out. And again, even then, it's kind of a slippery slope because they're not going to be able to throw. I don't think they're going to be able to throw Sterling out. What's actually going to happen is indefinite suspension, and then they're going to threaten him with the 29 votes, saying, "Look, we'll disenfranchise you, and we're willing to go into lengthy litigation." Like Sterling already said, he was going to sue him for $1.5 billion, right? So he already said that. It's already come out. So basically what's going to happen is they're going to force him to sell, and he needs the leverage from the other owners to do that. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I mean, like the only actions he could take are the ones he took, and only with the empowerment of the owners, and only with the understanding really like this ends
But
two ways.
so here's the
This
point.
ends two ways.
We can point it. We can point at
Sterling's going
Silver.
to Sterling's going to give the team to his family, or Sterling's going to sell the team. These are two things that are going to happen, and these are the only things Adam Silver could do. And Stern really didn't have the ability to do this because the owners are not going to want to. The owners are not going to want to throw Sterling out, like without a cause or without starting to lose sponsors. It's at the point where, like, you know, and much love to Paul Shirley, but when Paul Shirley said at one point on Twitter, said, like, why do people keep talking about it? And I said, look, we have to talk about it because the only way this is going to happen is everyone's talking about it, it's leading the news, and there's a upswell of public opinion, and there's like advertisers cutting their ties with the NBA, and that's what's going to drive the change. That was the only way this is going to happen, like, because the owners had to give the empowerment to the commissioner. Now, the commissioner didn't have the power to do this by himself.
No, I agree with that, but this is my point, and the reason I'm staying on this is like I'm happy with this, but even
Yes.
and I agree with your point too, by the way, that basically Sterling, or not Sterling, Silver and Stern represent the league. They represent the other owners. You and Vulgaris said to me, you said, you know, the league couldn't do anything when Sterling moved to LA. No, it's the league could easily have done something when they moved to LA. Oh man, Brian's telling us we're gonna have to move on. That's sad, but we should keep going. We may just have to cut the playoffs short and like give like 2 sentences for the end. So I'm actually going to keep going with this. But the league easily could have done something against, you know, Sterling moving to Los Angeles, but they didn't.
And much like I agreed with Haralbov, I'm going to agree with him again and say, like, the league can't do anything. The owners have to. And if the owners, the only way you're going to stop them,
point.
The owners do not want to give the league the power to stop them from moving. If I am an owner of an NBA team, I do not want Adam Silver telling me I can move my team or threaten to move my team. I want to have the ability to move my team because if I want,
what I'm cutting in with, what I want to stress here is, it is not that they couldn't, it's that they didn't, and that is a very key distinction. The same with Sterling, with putting up with him for years. Now, again, we should look at the
That's not
it's
true.
totally
Like,
it's totally true because the league is the owners.
What? Where do the Colts play?
But okay, yeah,
Where
I
do the
agree.
Colts
I'm saying
play?
this.
Where do the Raiders play? Where do
The Raiders are what?
play?
Oakland, right? Yeah.
The Raiders play in Oakland, and the Raiders move without league approval because Al Davis said, "I am moving the Raiders. I'm in a bad league.
No,
I don't like to say."
But so the point, to your point, Arturo, that's all I'm saying. The league being the owners, and then with, of course, you know, David Stern or Adam Silver making the agreement, have the power to do it. They didn't, and I mean, I actually agree with your point. They don't want to set a precedent.
This is basically and I'm trying not let's not get fired here, but this is what you basically sit down and you draw a risk matrix. There is a cost for pushing Donald Sterling out, right? It's going to cost them probably a couple $100 million in the end of the day between litigation and settlements and like forcing him to sell. And the owners have to be willing to incur that cost and have the league take that cost. And the only reason they're willing to incur that cost is that the cost to the league of keeping Donald Sterling on board was greater than the cost of getting rid of him. And the only reason this is the case is because the upswell of public opinion, right? Everyone was talking about it. It was costing them sponsors, and that's what drove the change here.
Again, and I'm fine with that, but again, what I'm stressing, and the reason I'm trepidatious, so for instance, Adam Silver, he did this at Sloan, I'll see if I can get the link because I believe it's up, said one of the things he wants to do is raise the age limit. I've discussed with a few people, I'm sorry, this is a very racist policy. You can argue it in a few different ways, but the simple fact is, I've loved your point, Arturo, the leagues in the United States that are primarily African American have this unpaid labor period that's required, and they're supposed to feel grateful. The leagues in the United States that are predominantly white, you know, they can start working as young as 16, and they're still exploited. I mean, that's the funny point to me is, you know, athletes, for as long as there have been athletes, have been exploited in terms of pay, but, you know, they're just way more exploited in terms of, you know, the NBA and the NFL.
I would make a point that, like, what, you're gonna make the claim that, like, labor isn't exploited in all fields?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to me, that's the point, is that these big corporations trying to underpay people is nothing new. The way the weird place it gets weird is when we hit these industries where they say we aren't allowed to pay them. It's, you know, you could exploit them.
Hey,
You could
look, it's
pay.
the invisible hand. The invisible hand. Sorry, go ahead.
This is why we shouldn't have economists on the show. Anyway, but that's all my point is that we've got these issues and we've got Adam Silver basically pushing for a racist policy. And the reason I'm trepidatious is that, yeah, the league knew about this, the league being the owners for years. I'm happy they're doing this, but all it means is that if you don't stay vigilant and say, look, this isn't a slam dunk for you. This is a you cleaning up your own mess. This is very much like the St. Louis Spirit saying, you guys messed up and you're paying for it now. You're paying hundreds of millions of dollars for it now. But, you know, you've got to keep up. If you want the business to succeed, you've got to keep up. And I'm just afraid that getting the pat on the back and people saying good job, that long term we're just going to see, you know, in the next CBA more things like raised age limits and weirder policies for players.
And we could go talk about the CBA. I think that's going to be that's a whole other ball of wax, because I think the other upshot of this is the players union basically forced this. The players union said, look, you know, you either do this or we're walking on a nationally televised playoff game. And this is and Chris Paul rapidly mobilized. He got Kevin Johnson, who's like a fantastic politician, to be the face of the union. He got him on the morning shows. He got him on TV. The players union was like as well organized and as well run as basically I've ever seen him. So I think actually this is really interesting, because you really saw and you probably really had the new leadership of the players union come together. So this is not really, this is, you know, Silver obviously kind of defined himself, but I think the players union and Chris Paul kind of defined themselves as well. And I think it's going to be really interesting when we go to the next CBA, because instead of having like a weak divided union, this looks like a union that basically just, they basically forced their hand and said, look, you either take care of this or we're walking. Right, and again, I think the owners had an incentive here, but like the fact that they were willing, and they came out and they said it on record to Deadspin, said, "Look, Warriors, we're gonna walk. We're gonna walk. If we would have walked if this actually hadn't gotten solved." So I think it's a very interesting kind of set of circumstances for like many things. But
so let me get the one last phrase on this, which is basically to say I'm happy about this. I'm actually going to give Silver, to your point, a little more credit, because you're right. The league, if we define the league as the collection of owners, would not have done this, and it's very rare to be able to force them. I'm still upset with them because they've let this behavior go on for decades, but it is impressive political maneuvering on Silver's part to get this through. The question being, is the league actually going to keep this up, or are we going to see other stuff? And so to fans out there, notice that your public opinion impacted this. Don't you know, sleep on stuff, because they are going to get other stuff like the age limit raised through. Just rest assured.
If there had not been the outrage that there was, right? If there hadn't been the outrage that there was, then this wouldn't happen. And I don't think, you know, like, I think only thing we can give credit to Silver is that with the power in his hand, he was willing to force this. And again, he was listening to. So I mean, again, this was a good business decision for him to make. And he made it. And because if not, I think it would have ended up like, you know, putting a black eye on the league. And this is not something that he wanted. So I mean, again, we got to be careful about making him a hero, because I think the situation called for the action that was taken.
You've actually just summed it, and I realize this is going to be interesting for me to listen back to, because I usually listen to them when I make the links to put on the site. I was much louder than normal, because I actually have been. This has drawn my ire, and I have dealt with a fair amount of people. You've seen me on some of the groups where it's like, I'm upset about this because to what you said, we have to be careful about making Adam Silver a hero. The right way to say it is, you did your job correctly. Your first major action as a commissioner, you've done right. Keep it up. Okay, so I apologize to this. As I mentioned, we were hoping to go over 3 playoff series in depth, but we've got a little under 10 minutes to go. So Arturo, I'm going to ask for a haiku. I'm going to ask you one question on each of the playoff series, but I want to talk in depth on OKC and Memphis. So could you just give a quick, you know, paragraph as to why did the Bulls lose? What do you tell Derrick Rose's mom?
Derrick who? Who's that?
Derrick Rose. You know, the cheerleader for the Chicago Bulls.
So the cheerleader. So again, I think the interesting thing is John Wall and Bradley Beal basically played probably the best they've played in their entire careers. And I think that was kind of key in this series. And I think partly because I think the Bulls didn't really have an effective like defender on the wing for both. And again, I think, Randy Whitman is still a terrible coach. I mean, they're still doing dumb things on offense. But they managed to put together a good defensive game plan that the Bulls didn't really have a counterpunch to, or didn't want to have a counterpunch to. I mean, I think Thibodeau kind of got exposed a little bit in the sense like he didn't like when stuff's not working, you got to do something different, and he really didn't. I mean, I kept expecting to see Taj and Boozer and Noah, and then Dunleavy and Heinrich or like DJ, or maybe even like Jimmer off the bench. Like he needed to find some shooting, and he needed to kind of change it up so he had like 4 or 5 guys who can actually shoot on the court. And again, I think they were able to keep the Bulls like turn them into a jump shooting team, and the Bulls just couldn't overcome that. I mean, again, I think it's also down to the fact that I think I've heard mention of the minutes they play, but I mean, it comes down to the fact that I think the Wizards were able to alter their rotations. They played the best they played all season, particularly Bill and Wall, and they were able to put together a defensive game plan that Chicago really couldn't overcome. They didn't have the talent to actually overcome it.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to talk about the stall, but just a shout out. Houston managed to stay alive. I can't believe we decided to record this with 2 close games going on. The other question, okay, this has been the most fascinating, and just for the record, for the wages, or not the wages, sorry, so used to saying wages of wins. We've done it at the wages of wins the last couple of years. The Boxscore Geeks playoff challenge, I actually picked your second most likely scenario, which is Atlanta defeating Indiana in 6. And Atlanta's up 3-2. So what, again, same question. One paragraph on why the heck is Atlanta up 3-2 against the #1 seed out east?
Roy Hibbert is actually putting up the 3rd worst playoffs for any center in the history of the NBA. If you go by win shares per 48, that's off the Basketball Reference website. He's been not just terrible, he's been horrible. And I think, and again, it comes down to what do? You adjust. And I think what's really interesting is they've got a decent backup center they picked up from LeBoy Allen's actually pretty good. They could be playing LeBoy Allen, but they're not really doing that. They're sticking to their guns, and it's just whatever. And I think Roy Hibbert might actually be hurt. I gotta suspect that he's either hurt or something's really wrong with him because he just looks like a different player. And if you watch that series, once you take him out and you take the defense out of the equation, you have a team that they can't shoot and they can't play defense. And before coming in, they looked like the worst team in the playoffs, and that really hasn't changed. I mean, the Hawks really should have won this series already, and it's kind of scary. I mean, I think we had this, but I think I kind of expected a little more in terms of these guys have already the Pacers have been in the playoffs before. Vogel's a good coach. But I think at this point, he's kind of lost the room. I think Vogel is a good coach, but it's just not working at this point. And he's not willing to blow it up because I think it's his guy, his system has worked for a couple of years, and he's not willing to kind of as I said before, when shit's not working, you got to try something different. And it's just Indiana's really not doing it. And again, I think the Hawks have been really smart in terms of let's just shoot threes and do things that these guys are not being able to cover right now. And I think Millsap is a really good player. We knew this. He's healthy now, and they're playing really well. I think they're Elton Brand hasn't been bad either in this series, and neither has Kyle Korver. But again, it comes down to Millsap has been really good, and Indiana doesn't have a plan B. And I think this is a running theme through the playoffs. We have all these teams that don't really have a plan B, and
you just named the podcast, which is going to be playoffs, no plan B, because that's what's happened to so many of these teams that are, it's been fascinating to me. For instance, Houston against the Portland Trailblazers, they're not a good matchup, and they're not adjusting to do anything.
Well, I think here's the thing. There's a couple series. There's actually I think 4 series that if we switch coaches in these series, the result is completely different. So if we switch coaches in the OKC Memphis series, that series is over. If we switch coaches,
so why don't we actually segue, because I actually have 3 minutes left according. I told you I had a hard stop. I'm going to let myself go a little over because I really want to argue with you on air about Russell Westbrook.
It's not like you went 10 minutes on Sterling, but keep going.
No, I was saying for the show as a whole, because in theory I could just say I don't really care about OKC, but I care about OKC. And by the way, yeah, Brian, our producer, gave us the go ahead on that. We were on We were running towards second. We had a double, and Brian waved us ahead towards third there. Said, keep going. So anyway, Oklahoma City down 2-3, 4 consecutive overtime games. Durant may have the current. And actually, this is a fun stat. Since the first round of the NBA playoffs has gone to 7 games, the only upset that hasn't happened is the number 2 seed in the West getting upset. So on the one hand, I'm a huge Kevin Durant fan. I'd love to see him advance. On the other hand, I'd like to see this upset happen to, complete the set. So what is going on here?
Here's an interesting number. Tom Haverson tweeted this out. In the 4 overtimes, Kevin Durant is 7 of 14 with 22 points. Russell Westbrook is 0 of 14 with 1 point. I've had like huge arguments about Russell Westbrook all day, and you and I were arguing about this, and I keep saying this. Look, Russell Westbrook is putting up like really good numbers in a really crappy system with a really bad coach. Like, basically, he's in a system that they're basically saying, Russ, here's the ball, roll it out, do whatever you want. And he's exactly the wrong guy for that. And
so the funny point, you and I were discussing this earlier. You said he should be more like a Dwayne Wade. And if you look at his athleticism, Russell Westbrook is fantastic at rebounding, fantastic at steals. He's actually, he wouldn't be bad at shooting, except he takes 20 shots a game and is bad at turnovers. You actually mentioned Dwayne Wade. What I noticed is Dwayne Wade's usage. If we look at true usage, like time of possession and touches, if he like dropped his usage to like Dwayne Wade levels, you're actually asserting he might be a star like Dwayne Wade. I was yelling at you this afternoon, but I'm coming around to that.
Well, basically, I mean, I think the point what I'm making is I don't know that I don't want Russell being my primary decision maker. It's fine for some stretches, but I don't want him to be my primary decision maker. I think it's a bad role for him. Play him off the ball, have him move around, have run sets for him, put him in positions to win. He is a great talent. He is fantastic. He puts up, as I said, he puts up star level numbers like for stretches in a really bad system. And it's really, I mean, like anybody who's watching these games, it's like, and I was telling somebody was like what happened last night? And I was like, a coworker was telling me this. And I was like, look, think about this. If you're down 1 in a playoff series, you call a timeout, you draw up a set. You have Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook on your team, who are top 5 for the last 4 or 5 years at getting to the damn line. Do you take a contested 3, or do you throw Durant or Westbrook towards the basket and have the guys try to foul him, try to draw a foul, get to the hole? And Scotty Brooks is just the worst possible coach. It's a bad marriage. It's the worst possible coach for Russ. Russ needs a guy who would give him structure. I would love to see him with somebody like, and I said this, Carl.
So can I ask another question?
Carl or Mike D'Antoni or somebody who, Stan Van Gundy, who knows what they're doing, who can give him structure and teach him the damn game. Scotty Brooks is not teaching him the game. He's teaching him. He's basically like propagating his bad habits.
So let me ask you a question. You kind of said Russell Westbrook is a Dwayne Wade-like player, and this to me is intriguing because Dwayne Wade is actually able to shoot at a rate similar to Russell Westbrook. He's actually able to assist at a higher rate than Russell Westbrook if you look at per minute when they hold the ball. Could you put Russell Westbrook next to a decent point guard and still let him shoot a ton? Still say go ahead and shoot.
Yes, he was a shooting guard in college when he played with Kevin Love. He's a converted shooting guard. And like you could play him next to Reggie Jackson. They've played him next to Reggie Jackson. And again, this is why I get frustrated with Scotty Brooks, which is look, the most logical thing you could do is play Reggie, play Russ off the ball, have KD play split 3 and 4 depending, play Serge at the 5 when you can, right? I mean, there are things you could do with that roster, and he just doesn't. And again, it's kind of, they're never going to win the title with Scotty Brooks as a coach. I can't see. It's just he's the wrong coach. And again, I used to say, look, it's Westbrook is a bad marriage with Kevin, but it's not really Westbrook because it's what they have him do in that offense and that system that makes him a bad fit. Because a smart coach basically, uses Kevin Durant appropriately, uses him, puts him in the right situations. And again, he did for part of the season when he was kind of forced to, but he doesn't do it now. I mean, we've seen this offense run with a traditional point guard, and with traditional point guard, Kevin Durant was like otherworldly. And
you're arguing if you just plugged Russell Westbrook and said, look, you don't need to hold the ball 20% of the time you're on the court. you can take a ton of shots, but just don't, for the love, don't be the first one to touch the
Run
ball.
cuts, like basically, like here's video of Manu Ginobili, right? Here's what we want you to do. Hell, I'd even think about running him in the six man role, and basically run him with a second unit, kind of like San Antonio does. Still play him 40 minutes a night, still play him in crunch time, but like basically run him off and have Reggie and KD come out first. As I said, there's a million things you could do with this roster, and he's not doing. I'd consider. Look, here's what worked. We were crazy effective when we were running the offense with like a traditional point guard with Reggie Jackson and KD basically like doing KD things and running the offense through him. Let's start the game with that, and like let's make like Memphis cover us with a guy who shouldn't be covering like KD, and then like throw out Russ against the second unit. He'll murder the second unit, and then like we'll throw them out in crunch time together and like figure out sets to run. And again, I mean, it can't be one of these situations where every time. And this is great. People who know, like, we follow people who know basketball on Twitter, and every time that Scotty calls a timeout, everybody just groans. It's like, oh my God, he's going to run something that it's just dumb. And every time it is, we see him come out of timeout. And I wish I was wrong. I wish I knew what to tell you, like OKC fans. But every time he does this, it's kind of like, what the hell? And again, in this first round, he's playing a rookie coach who's doing a good job. But I mean, it's only going to get rougher. I mean, if you're playing the second round, you're playing Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers knows how to, like, if you run this bad offense against like Doc's going to kill you. And I think it just gets tougher and tougher every single round. And again, I honestly think that this team needs to be rethought. And I think what my personal mission in life would be to have this team with a good coach would be fantastic. With George Karl, with D'Antoni, with one of the Van Gundys, it would be crazy.
You're killing me with that comment, but one of the points you've made about George Karl is if he doesn't have to make personnel decisions, he actually does well. So that's painful, but I agree with you. So by the way, we're just hitting my time limit where I said I needed to rush off into the sunset. So my last question, Thunder are down 2-3. Who do you think takes the series?
Memphis.
Wow. So they're going to play spoiler. If they and Golden State do this, they're just going to be the biggest spoilers in the playoffs.
Kevin Durant is in his own head, and basically at this point he doesn't trust his shot. Tony Allen basically trick or treat is playing out of his mind on defense, and he's taking them out. And I think right now that basically means that Memphis can take him out and then say, look, let Russ be Russ. And with Scotty and Russ, it just doesn't work. And I think we're going to see Memphis Clippers again. And I think it's fate. And I thought that OKC should be the favorite. I thought these teams were dead even. And they have been. It's 4 overtimes. At this point, these teams are dead even. It's just when you have two teams that are dead even, then defense and coaching, man, that just make a huge difference. And I think that's been the key in the series.
Awesome. Okay, so thanks so much for joining us. Hope you didn't mind yelling Dre about Donald Sterling. Hope we gave you enough. These playoffs are just absurd. We're going to talk more. Don't worry. I can't. This doesn't happen. There is not normally this much news in the first round. I was going to say, definitely want to give a shout out to Brent Barry, the coolest slam dunk champion to follow me. I didn't know this. He was in Jerry Maguire, the movie, so that's awesome. Brent, you've been awesome on Twitter. Arturo, I know I asked you this before the show, and I didn't think. Do you have anybody you'd like to give a shout out? I've been enjoying this for the week, giving shout outs to various people.
I was going to give a shout out to the great OKC Twitter fans. And I feel bad for you guys because it's been kind of crazy. And I think I was gonna ask, can I have a one sentence for each one of the other series?
That's 5. Go for it.
Yeah. So Spurs are Spursing out. I think the DeJuan Blair was actually really good for the Mavs, and it's really bad that he kicked Thiago Splitter in the head. I think, as I said, the Warriors and the Clippers. The Warriors have actually gotten lucky because of Donald Sterling. It's kind of gone away. The Clippers look like a conference finalist or a finalist. Let's see, who am I forgetting?
No love to the Heat.
I was gonna say before the Heat fans, before you get too excited about sweeping the Charlotte Bobcats, realize the Charlotte Bobcats have never won a playoff game. And I think the Raptors and the Nets, I had a 8 hours of community service bet going about that series going either Raptors 6 or the series going 7, and I won. Thank you, Raptors.
Awesome. Okay, everybody, have a good week, and we will see you next week for more playoff action.